Continue same as Tote C steps 6 and 7. Turn your directions to Tote C, find steps 6 and 7. Step 6. Stitch band lining to upper edge of bag lining. Stitch remaining seams of bag lining, same as for bag, leaving an opening in one side seam for turning. With right sides together, stitch lining to upper edge of bag, matching seams, trim seam. This step is giving us 3 directions. We will complete the first one of attaching the band lining to the upper edge of bag lining.
We have just attached the pocket to the inside lining. We are now going to put the band on top of this. This is the same thing that you did for the outside of the bag. Take the band, right sides together, line up the raw edges. You'll be doing the same process on both pieces of the lining. Come across and pin. You will be doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this, and you will be stitching right over the pocket. Once you have it pinned, double check that your edges are even, and you can go to the machine and do your 1/2 inch seam allowance. We are now going to be connecting the lining band to the lining inside. We are going to be stitching straight across. It is a straight stitch. Make sure that you reverse. This is nice and easy. You want to maintain that 1/2 inch seam allowance. You will be stitching over the pocket that you basted on. Keep a nice consistent stitch all the way through. When you get to the end of your band, you will backstitch. The important thing when you do the other side of your lining is that you want to keep the same seam allowance because you want the 2 linings to match up. When you are finished, your stitch should look like this.
To complete the next part of this step, stitch remaining seams of bag lining, same as for bag, leaving an opening in one side seam for turning.
You have now stitched the lining band to the lining on both sides, so you have 2 lining pieces. You are going to be connecting them the same way you did the outside of the bag. Open up the band, right sides together, you want to make sure that your seams here are down on both of them. You are going to be looking for the same things you did when you sewed the outside of the bag together. Raw edges even, and you want to make sure that the seams from the 2 match up. There is only one difference when sewing the lining together. We are going to need to leave one hole open on one side. So you'll be sewing side, bottom, and side again. And then you'll be sewing the corners just like you did with the outside of the bag. However, this time you'll leave one side have a hole in it. The way that I indicate where I want to leave the hole is by putting a double pin. This way, it reminds me not to stitch past the 2 pin mark. So I am going to leave this part open when I sew. I'll do a 1/2 inch seam, stop here, restart here, and sew to the bottom. Make sure you pin everything first. Now that you have your 2 lining pieces pinned all the way around, indicating where you're going to leave it open, you can go ahead to your machine and complete your 1/2 inch seam all the way around, excluding the corners because we will pinch the corners together the same as we did with the outside of the bag to create those corners. We are now stitching our 2 lining pieces together, and back stitching. This side is the side that I'm going to leave that small opening. The reason we need that opening is because we are going to need to turn our bag right side out, and we need a way to do that. You can see I'm approaching my double pin, which indicates that I'm going to stop. Go ahead, back stitch there. I am now going to move my material up past this opening, past my next double pins, and start again. I am going to do a back stitch because I'm starting a new stitch, and come all the way to the end. Finish with a back stitch. This is your finished product once you sew the side, bottom, and side of your lining. Note the hole on the side. You are going to construct the corners the same way you did with the outside of the bag. Grab them open, right sides together. You will pin along here and sew at 1/2 inch. Do this on both sides to complete your lining.
To complete this step, with right sides together, stitch lining to upper edge of bag, matching seams, trim seam. Refer to the illustration for help. Lining is indicated with a polka dot design. The right side of the material is indicated with shading. This will help you to see which material is on the outside and which is on the inside.
Now that you have both the shell of your bag and the lining done, you're going to be putting them together. You need to do right sides together. Right now my lining is inside out. My pocket is on the inside. To get right sides together, I am going to place the outside of my bag into the inside of my bag. That hole that you left is going to come into play when we turn this right side out. Now that my bag is together, I am going to be lining up my seams. I have a seam here from my lining and a seam here from the outside of my bag. Open up this seam on both the lining and the outside of the bag and put a pin here to hold this place. The next place you are going to put a pin is in the same spot on the other side. The reason that we are starting here is because we want our seams to be even. Open up the seam on the lining, matching it up with the seam on the outside of the bag, pinning them together. We are doing right sides together, the same as we have been doing the entire project. Put a pin here to hold its place. Now what you are going to do is you are going to go around the top of the bag and pin so that the raw edge of the lining and the raw edge of the bag match up. You should have now pinned all the way along the top. The raw edges of the lining and the outside of the bag are even. You are going to be doing a 1/2 inch stitch all the way around, which is going to connect the lining to the outside of the bag. You are now sewing the lining to the outside of the bag. Start on one of your seams. This allows you to have that reverse stitch on a seam and not in the middle of your bag where it will be more of an eyesore. You are going to start with a reverse stitch. You want to make sure that the other side of the bag is not underneath here. So you want to keep grabbing the underside and pulling it away so that you do not sew the top of your bag together so that you can't get into it. This is a circular stitch now because you'll be stitching all the way around. So you'll keep having to pull from underneath as the bag comes through. So as the bag comes through, I pull from underneath. I'm always checking to make sure that I'm only stitching the two pieces that I want and that there's not anything underneath from the other half of the bag. Pull the bag around so that you have a nice straight line on your material as you stitch. I'm coming up to that other seam. Make sure that it is open when you go over it. If it starts to fold like this, put your needle in the down position, lift up your presser foot, and push that seam allowance down. You want to make sure that you sew it down when you go over it. You'll be coming up to where we started, which allows us to have our reverse stitch in the same spot. When you are done, your two pieces are connected. We are going to trim this in half to eliminate the bulk before we turn this right side out.